Do you have an area of your life where you struggle to just be yourself, to feel like you're really truly being who you are? This could be in a career, it could be in a relationship, it could be elsewhere, but it's those areas of life where we feel like we're trying to live up to someone else's standards or expectations, or we're not free to do things the way that we actually want to do them, or we feel like we have to do some things a certain way. Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Dr. Alex Swenson Ridley, and today we're going to really dive into this in a much deeper way, ideally with my dog not barking through the entire thing. And this is coming off of, both a group call that I had with my clients. We have a couple group calls during the week, as well as a retreat that I was in myself over the weekend that really had me looking hard at this and had us having this conversation. In our group call, we were discussing, like, particularly in our roles in the workplace, whether it's in corporate or as a business owner, or you know just in leadership roles in general through volunteer or any of that kind of stuff, where it can be challenging especially when we're in roles that have traditionally been held by males, to really show up authentically as ourselves, like fully embodied as females. And I'm not sharing this to, get into like a feminist discussion or anything like that. But, I think the more that we have entered the workplace as women, and our roles have evolved, and, we're not truly equal because of how pay is structured and a bunch of other stuff. But, we've evolved in a lot of ways, but it's like we're stuck in this mold that is very patriarchal. It's driven by, a male-dominated sphere, and so a lot of times we can be left feeling like we can't really just be ourselves, or we have to live up to some standard, right? And so I was in this retreat this weekend that was actually all about looking at what's called patriarchy stress disorder. And I've had the woman who leads it, and is kind of the author and brainchild thinker of like, this is her baby, her brainchild is that term. And I actually had her on the show, so I'll put a link to her interview in the show notes as well if it interests you to kind of listen to just her take on these things. But we were getting into like the trauma that comes with a patriarchal system of society, one that has been male dominated. And this can be like generations back. It doesn't just have to be us, right? Like, a lot has changed, but sometimes we have this inner programming, subconscious stuff that is designed to keep us safe, but is based on old world ideals and don't really apply anymore. But in the process of that, and we'd also had this discussion in my group right before I did all this work in this retreat, just talking about the frustration with, like, if you are a strong woman in a leadership role, you're called a bitch. If you So you can't be too strong, you can't be like the men, but you also can't be, too soft of a woman. And it's like this weird place. I have another client who's dealing with, like, she's moved up into a very high level leadership position in her organization in the last year, and she runs up against that. It's like she doesn't have freedom to just be herself because she's too direct, or she's not direct enough. It's like there's no happy medium. And I'm not saying that, we don't all have the opportunity to grow, especially as we move into leadership roles and whatnot. And there what I think we're missing is permission to be creative and really like be in the have the opportunity to create what that looks like for us and what that is for us. So I'm going to use my own example to just kind of illustrate this, and to take from it what is valuable, and leave the rest. But all of you who listen to the show, or if you've been around for any period of time, know that I originally was a chiropractor, and I spent about a decade in that position, that role. I built a huge practice. We Not many chiropractic practices reaches the level that mine was at, which is something I didn't acknowledge for a long time. But I had 12 staff, 7 providers, 5 support staff, and we billed well over 7 figures a year and collected just shy of that because of how the insurance world works. But in that role, there was a lot that I had to learn, a lot that was really challenging. I got walked all over a lot. I don't have the natural personality that, like, the male world says, is a, a good functioning, like, CEO type personality, right? I tried to please everybody and was very much, you know, doing things in a way that was focused on everyone else and not so much on what I actually needed. And I've shared that. And what I didn't recognize that really came out of this retreat that I was in, one of the things that we talked about is that we, you, me, each of us, are our resource for time and money. I'm going to say that again. You are your resource for time and money. And these are two areas where we consistently, and I mean collectively, we, like everyone in the world, but a lot of women have a lot of scarcity around it. And, there's never enough time or there's never enough money. And we're always like putting that resource in other things or allowing other people to dictate that resource. And that's actually a form of trauma. Like trauma is any time that we feel disempowered or like we don't have a choice, right? And so I had this realization that, I have loved the chiropractic profession. I embodied it in like probably an unhealthy way for a long time. And there's an identity conversation in there that we can have too. But it was very much driven by like, what a successful chiropractic practice looked like had these parameters around time specifically, money as well, just being wrapped up in the gamut of the insurance world. But the time piece was the one that really got to me. And I realized how much trauma I had around that because I was very much every, business coach I had and mentor that I followed in that world, were all male, but also it was like, shorten your appointment times and you have to be open these hours and you have to work this late and you have to do trade shows and you have to like there was all these things that you had to do. And I hated most of them. And I started my business when my son was 6 weeks old. His adjusted age was only 1 week. And so he grew up in this environment, but like I was always working and we were always at the office. And I set it up so like that was comfortable, but either he was with a nanny or he was with me there. And like that was just the construct of that. And I didn't see a way out. It was like, you shorten your appointment times because time is money and you build insurance because that's just the model that worked, where I was. We hadn't reached the point which a lot of the rest of the country's at. And we reached a couple of years ago now, but where insurance wasn't really covering chiropractic that well. So it still was when I first opened my practice. And so we were stuck in these models. And I just had this moment of like clarity and working through this of how freaking traumatic it actually was and how much I had been carrying that and even carrying it into business that I do now, much less so, but it was like I wasn't even aware of it. Like I was aware of the physical trauma that happened to my body with my wrist getting torn to shreds and all that, but I really hadn't equated how much of just the business model itself and what was expected of me and what role I was trying to fill. I felt like I grew a lot and did a lot in terms of, being empowered in how I led. And I really created like a team and we had a great kind of family atmosphere. The culture was really, really great for many, many years. Things as I shifted, that shifted and that's okay. That's all part of the process. But it's like I nailed that. But the rest of it was just, like, exhausting, and it's no wonder that I completely burnt out now or, when I did, but looking at that, it was like at first I got angry. I was just, like, angry at the institution and then at the profession even and, creating this thing that was just it's not a life, right? There's no quality of life, and it's definitely, like, a life for a woman? No. And I even did this exercise, my one of my mentors after I'd gone through I've shared on here, I went through bankruptcy with that business, just circumstances being what they were through the pandemic and me really needing to stop doing that in general. But I had a coach challenge me to write 250 good things that came out of out of going through that. And I asked my husband for some help with it, and he's like, "Well, you don't work until like 8 o'clock at night anymore." That's like touche. That's that is a very good thing. And so, I share this and just bringing this into context, like, where are you sacrificing or not living out like who you really want to be or the life that you really want to have because of some construct that says somewhere that this is what this is supposed to look like? Like, who says that it has to look like that? What definition of success are we using for that? And can we just start to be okay? And we can, because I made this shift this weekend. Like I was really able to just release that. Like I said, I started off kind of angry and but not attaching anything to the anger, but just like being like, whoa, okay, I'm kind of angry about this. And that was like an unconscious thing that I didn't know was in my body. And so we were both it was very interesting to be in this conversation about patriarchy while I was at my youngest stepson's state championship football game watching cheerleaders. Football and cheerleading are like 2 things that I feel like really epitomize kind of the whole patriarchal system, but I'm like, this is interesting. And so I'm having I'm, like, listening to this conference while, watching the game, and I'm just, like, having these, like, intense emotional, like, releases of this football game, and I'm like, "Hey, it's great. It's all good." Um, and, yesterday, this is Monday that I'm recording this, so on Sunday, I we were still down in Anchorage in a hotel room, and, like, I was just exhausted. I was so tired, and it felt like I was just, needing to release. It's like I hadn't slept in a decade is how it felt. I slept for 9 hours, and then I took a 2-hour nap, and my husband and my son were like, are you okay?" I was like, "I just can't wake up," and it was like my body just needed that release, and, so I felt a little off kilter all day yesterday, and then today, it's like I just feel clear, and I can breathe, and it's like, wow, that was a lot. And so, I share this kind of in two two ways. Like, one, I want you to really look at, not everyone has my story, and I get that, but a lot of us and those who listen to this show, like, we work in you're working and you're in leadership roles and you're, a mom and a family, and you volunteer, you do all this stuff. And so really looking at, like, how are you showing up in that? Are you doing all these things because you're supposed to do them? Because, like, at some point it was created that you just do them that way? I think of there's a story in a book that I've read before that talks about, like, in a certain family, it was just passed on that they always cut off the two ends of the ham before putting it in the oven. And someone finally was like, "Why do we do this?" And the mom was like, "I don't know." And then asked the grandma, "Why do we do this?" And she said, "Oh, my pan was too small." Right? It's like we get these traditions and these things handed down to us that at the time was like how they adapted, and they just get passed on as, truth. But things change, and, like, the pans are bigger now. Who knew? And this is just a metaphor for all of us. But I really challenge you to, look at your life and where are you stifling yourself and maybe carrying weight. Like, a lot of the things that I, bring a lot of women to me is low energy. Like, do you know how much freaking energy was tied up in that just, like, oppressive, like, "Oh, it has to look a certain way, my time is not my own," and, like, the scarcity around time and money, but the time one was the one that really stuck out to me. And just, like, that release is like, "Holy crap." I don't normally swear on this show, so I won't, but, holy S word. Um, so it's been really intense and cool. So that's the first, is just, like, looking at your own life there. And the second is, I've shared a little bit about kinda how I've evolved, especially over the last year, and it's not like I don't still do things with nutritional healing and, like, the physical side of healing, but this these conversations, this kind of work is the stuff that really has become the crux of what I'm doing, because this is what we need to do in order to have any success with any of the external stuff we're always trying, right? When we're trying the diets and the pills and all this stuff, like, we have to get clear on who we've been and who we really want to be first, and, like, work through releasing this stuff. And so that's really where I dive in and work. And, we do it both in a group setting and in a one-on-one setting. And the group, like the community, just brings such a peace to that conversation, because it helps us realize we're not alone, but you also get to, know yourself and hear yourself in other women's stories and shares. So if that is something that is sounding like, you can do it on your own, it takes really long. Just put it that way. And it's hard to really see. Like, I only saw that perspective and was able to see that, create that shift in myself over the weekend, because I was in a group of women, and, like, everyone was kind of, going through this stuff and sharing. And another shift for me was around, I recognized, like, just ancestrally, I have Dr. Valerie Rain is who is the kind of leader of doing the work in this particular way. So she calls them prison guards. But, I have this story that runs in this, again, in my subconscious, that has to do with it not being safe to be an independent woman. And yet I have lived my whole life, like, being like, I'm an independent woman and blah, blah, blah. But those two things are at war with me, like, themselves. So I am at war with the old programming that's like, oh no, that's not safe. And so it looks like self-sabotage and, like, only getting to a certain point and then crashing and burning, and just so much energy. Like, if you think about that, like, going on in your own body, and how much energy and stress and like all consuming that can be, even with us necessarily being aware of it. So, unpacking, uncovering these things in community is so because I wouldn't have been able to name that. I guess that's what I was getting at. Like someone said, they had a issue with independence and also visibility. That's another one that runs rampant for women. But you need the group to community, that aspect to really it expands and accelerates the process astronomically. So as I was getting to very long-windedly, if this kind of work, if doing, this internal work, if you're recognizing yourself in things that I'm sharing, if you're looking for that support to really go deep and go inside and not be so focused on like, I need to eat a certain way. And especially if you feel like you've done all that, like physical, functional medicine stuff, and you're still stuck, this is where I want to meet you and come alongside you and partner with you and really help guide you through the process in a safe container to do the work that's going to get you to the other side. So, if that sounds like you, I don't have a sales page created. I don't have any of that stuff set up yet. So, just shoot me an email, dralex@emergentwomencoaching.com. All that'll happen from there is we'll have a conversation and figure out if, you know, how I do things is a fit for where you're at and where you want to be, and we'll go from there. But that I just wanted to, share that invitation is there, and this is the work that really lights me up and makes me excited, and that I want to, you know, bring to you and partner with you when you are ready. So again, you can email me, dralex@emergentwomencoaching.com. It's in the show notes as well if you need a link to click. And with that, that was a lot, and I got really excited sharing that. So hopefully this served you, and we will see you next week. Bye.